So what are we going to look at in this webinar? Well, first of all, we'll do a little bit more general context in a moment. We'll then go back to basics and look at, well, what can Section 106 cover to be a lawful planning obligation? We'll then look at the tests for validity, both in terms of policy and also in terms of the attitude of the courts to that issue. We'll then move away from the kind of slightly more academic stuff to the practical stuff around parties and practical issues that arise around that. Look at issues such as heads of terms and some of the drafting issues that might arise. And then we'll look at more mundane things like costs, monitoring, completion of agreements. And finally, what happens if someone does not comply with the terms of an agreement. So how low can we go now? Well, this case involved an application for an edge of centre food store, which had been previously refused. And a couple of months later, a second almost identical application was submitted. The only difference between the two was that there was a covering letter saying, if you give us planning permission, we will give you a cheque for £100,000 towards town centre improvements. And permission was granted on that basis. The Lincolnshire Co-op decided they didn't really like that decision and challenged it. If you have multiple parties, that can sometimes create issues in practice. And we'll see in a moment how you might deal with some of those, but also a very recent case dealt with how you might approach it in practice. Now, in my view, a lot of conveyancing practice has come into the 106 regime, and there's often a sort of rush to ensure that all legal and equitable interests are bound. As I said on the previous slide, that is completely unnecessary. And in fact, in the McLaren case, it confirmed the position that there is no requirement in 106 itself for all parties, even with a legal interest in the land, to be a party to the agreement.